So a huge part of my professional life has been networking, literally knowing people for the sake of knowing people to connect them to each other. And of course, that's things I do through when I organize for past several years Indicate speakers. These days, as the alumni coordinator, the 10 years ish of them that I know factor into that. Organizing speakers for my podcast, connecting people in different cities, and lots of stuff that I do as a teacher, as an educator, as someone getting guest speakers for different clubs that aren't even my club, and so on. Knowing and communicating with people is an important part of what I do. And I mentioned this today because something I occasionally hear when I'm out there in the networking world is, oh, I don't have a Twitter, or I don't use Instagram, I'm not on Facebook. And now on the one hand, I get it. These platforms have their downsides. They are sometimes security issues. They are sometimes time sinks. They are sometimes just bad for our headspace because it's just a horrible space of junk being said. I'm not saying that everybody needs to have an active account on all these platforms. In terms of constantly scrolling through it or posting to it or catching up on it, or just you don't. But what I will say is that if you are among the population who says, I don't do Twitter, I don't have an Instagram, I don't do Facebook, what you're really saying, and I want to be super clear about what you're really saying, because it might not be what you think you're saying, but it's what you're saying to others. What you're saying is, I don't care to communicate with the people who utilize that as their main communications platform. That's it. And one of the things to be sensitive to is that even a few years of difference in age demographic, or different kind of cultural backgrounds, different kind of ages, different kinds of countries of origin, there are different platforms that more or less get used disproportionately, and even within a single region here in Los Angeles, California. And people who are plus or minus 5 years of each other, there are people who I know from years of being in contact with these people, they will never read and look at an email. They won't respond to a Facebook message, but they will respond to a Twitter DM. Or that they don't look at their Twitter DMs. They are overwhelmed, they got too many of them. But they will respond, believe it or not, to a LinkedIn message. Or there's actually pretty, let's say, important people who get hounded by crowds in big public settings, who it turns out that they get hammered with fan messages and all kinds of platforms, but the way that you get them, and the thing that they use for their professional communications, is like Google Chat or something when I had to work with those people. And it's just this reminder that part of, as absurd as it seems, communication in the modern world with different people of different groups is recognizing the value of, at minimum, and again, I'm not saying make a dozen platform accounts and expect to be running a social media company out of your, just whatever. You can have, let's say you pick one platform that's your main platform. You decide, you know what? I like Instagram. I like Twitter. I like Facebook. I like, heck, Gmail, for goodness sakes. Fine. I don't care. Here's the deal. In that case, make the account. If possible, use the same handle on all accounts. It gets mixed up and messy when you got a different username everywhere. Pick a handle you're kind of okay with if you can figure one out. I know it's its own challenge. Let's assume you've solved that because you're watching this video. Pick a handle, get that handle on every single platform. Even if you don't intend to use it, make a single post, right? And that post can be like, hey, what's up, y'all? I don't really use Twitter. Check me out on Instagram at whatever, your name on Instagram, which, hey, because you have the same username on Twitter as Instagram, means that it's a valid link to yourself and not some stranger or rando, since the at on Twitter is going to, of course, at to Twitter and not the account on Instagram. This also protects you from someone else coming in and pretending to be you, which on the one hand, you might think like, well, I'm not a celebrity. Who's going to try to impersonate me? Actually, you might be surprised. There are people who troll each other, even just as students, as peers, as competitors, as frustrated customers, as whatever. That's a thing. It's an easy attack vector if you don't have your username on Reddit or something. And so again, if you get an account on one of these major services, I'm also not talking about all the hundreds of emerging 1 in 100 gajillion people are on the platform. No one else is online or using it. Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about these things that essentially in 2019 are basically versions of, whether we like it or not, the telephone and what it used to be. For all its flaws, it used to be there was kind of one way you reached people. I guess two. You either wrote a letter or you used the telephone. These days, you kind of got to keep straight who is it that contact is responsive on different platforms and how to best reach them. And again, it's based on all kinds of stuff, right? You can kind of loosely categorize it, I find, by age group. by whether it's a professional or personal kind of communication. By, I mean, heck, there's even people where Discord messages is the way to reach them, right? Or a message on a certain Slack that you have to be on to even message them, since Slack works different than Discord. Now, you also want to try to avoid, probably goes without saying, you want to try to avoid woofing people. I use woof. It's a term from the show The Office, in which the intern made a technology where you message somebody, it will simultaneously fax them, call them, email them, hit them up with messages, all that kind of stuff. You want to try to avoid spamming someone across every single service just to get their attention, if you can avoid it. If it's an emergency, well, you do what you got to do. Otherwise, what you're really trying to do, right, is feel out, okay, what's the best way to reach this person? And then, when possible, continuing the conversation on one, just to help both of you keep that conversation managed in one place, if possible. I'll also say another reason why this is important, why it comes up, what I'll often do, right, and you see these posts on my Instagram, on my Twitter, when I'm out at a meeting, luncheon, at a networking event, at a conference, whatever, I will set up a group selfie, and quite often I will even bring a collapsing tripod in my backpack and just take a good, decent group photo. Then I pass my phone around and I say, tag yourself on Twitter or Instagram as it goes around, whichever one we're posting it to. And once again, one reason I do this is because I make sure I can easily find those people and follow them afterwards, and vice versa. They can't ignore or lose track of who I was in the group. If I posted a photo with us and they're tagged in it, they found me. But if their answer is, I don't have an account on that platform, they can put their name. I can't follow their thoughts that way, and vice versa, or they can't easily reach me and vice versa in that situation. But once again, if all they have is basically think of it like a squatter account, they set it up. They put their legitimate profile picture, ideally one that matches how they look on Facebook or some other service, or vice versa. They have a single post that says, hey everybody, as a heads up, I don't really use Facebook anymore, or I don't really use Twitter, or you got one picture on Instagram, and it's literally text that just says, find me on Twitter, find me on Facebook, here's my email address, however you want to put yourself out there, however you want to be reached. Probably not your phone number, but for some people, their phone number, I guess. That's also the thing, too, of the whole generation of us, right? We kind of if someone calls me on the phone, it better be an emergency. I also just don't answer unsaved phone numbers because I receive a high volume of spam. Anyway, kind of neither here nor there. There was a generation where that was the answer for everybody. There are also still people who prefer to be reached on the phone, spoken to on the phone, talk on the phone, and to a lot of us in a different, even slightly different generation, that's weird. But once again, if you want to make a point of being able to be in contact with people who are different age groups, different demographics, different backgrounds, different fields, different focus, different disciplines, different experience, different regions, you're going to need to have at least a message presence with a notification and or a message left behind saying, oh, I'm not here anymore, but hit me up on blank, where blank is a service you actually read, answer, respond to, and so on. That's it for the day. Thanks for tuning in. Have an everybody tomorrow.